welcome everybody. Some people may come and go, but welcome to our current and alumni Rhyze Up participants to our Rhyze Up year-end educational event. It's really great to see everybody, our current and past participants. It's wonderful. I'm Linda Horowitz. I'm the program manager at Innovation Guelph, or a program manager at Innovation Guelph, I should say. And most of you already know Carly Beneteau, who's also from Innovation Guelph, and she's been supporting the event with all things tech. So for those of you who are here right now, I just want to take a moment as well to congratulate Carly, because as of April 1st, this Friday, she will actually be the new program manager for Rhyze Up. And we are excited to see where Carly's going to take the program in the future. Very excited about that.
Thanks.
So for your information, we are recording this event and we're going to share the session with you afterwards. To be more accessible, you have the option of turning on the Zoom closed captioning feature if you wish. It can be turned on by using a button on your screen. We'll also be providing French translated version of the session after it's been recorded for those of you who may need it. Most of you are familiar with Innovation Guelph. We work to support businesses to start, grow, and thrive in Guelph and the surrounding communities and beyond, of course, because we have some people on board here today that are from outside of Ontario. You can see more about Innovation Guelph on our website, and if you are a company or you're looking for more support, or if you know somebody you would like to chat with us, please feel to reach out to us. I would like to take a moment to thank our corporate sponsors, BDO, Ernst & Young, Miller Thompson, Rhyze Informatica, Invest in Guelph. We are very grateful always for their generosity and support in everything that we do here at Innovation Guelph. And we would also like to give a special thank you to our Rhyze Up funder, the National Research Council of Canada Industrial Research Assistant Program, otherwise known as NRC IRAP. They enable us to provide this program to our companies and put on these kinds of events. So we want to give a big thank you to IRAP for their support with the Rhyze Up program. Now, Rhyze Up is wrapping up its third year, and we are glad we have both companies and clients joining from across the country. And we have a really full agenda for you today. So as we mentioned earlier, if you do have to leave for something and want to come back in, that's okay. But we hope that you'll be able to join us for the full time that we're here. I would like to now introduce you to our first educational session and facilitator. When we put out the survey for topics for this event, there was a strong consensus across everybody that you would like to learn about sales strategy and sales processes. So our first topic is about sales strategy. So I would like to introduce George Stakos, an Innovation Guelph mentor for our first educational session. It's using a sales strategy to scale your B2B business to 1 million and beyond. Some of you may have worked with George during your time with the Rhyze Up program, so you already know him. But George is a highly experienced executive supported by 30 years of professional sales, marketing, and operations expertise. He has used exceptional leadership and creativity, developing and winning new business opportunities, and driving operational excellence in organizations in order to exceed business targets. So, George, the floor is yours.
Thanks very much, Linda. Welcome, everybody. Let me just share my screen here. One second. Apologies for technical difficulties. And there it is. All right. So welcome, everybody. It's a pleasure to see some familiar faces. It's a pleasure to see some new faces as well. What I hope you get out of today is sales strategy, quite frankly, can be defined in multiple ways. It is not your business plan. So that's the first thing I want to tell you. All right. Sales strategy is an offshoot of your business plan. We'll get into that shortly as well. And if you think about it, really the sales strategy is your documented plan of all the sales initiatives you need to undertake in order to realize company revenue and your revenue growth goals. It is part of a business plan, and it is intimately tied to a business plan, but it is not the business plan. And the way to think about it is, if you think about your business plan and the core elements of a business plan, they include the definition of a market or a business problem. They include potential market size, or what's possible in terms of our revenue for a company. It will also describe what might be considered attractive segments within that business plan, and then it'd be backed up by financial projection. So a revenue growth, obviously profitability, but primarily revenue growth is where the sales strategy typically fits. Sales strategy, yes, it is about the sales team or the sales organization. It is intimate. It helps that organization to maximize its potential, but it's a lot more than that. And I hope you'll see that as part of the presentation that I have today. It is the practical execution of everything you need to do from a sales perspective in order to realize your revenue growth goals. And that's how B2B companies can scale to $1 million and beyond. The typical horizon also for a sales strategy, by the way, is about a year. All right. Things change fundamentally, especially in young companies as they experience their markets, as they experience client conversations and understand the value proposition and fit within those markets. Those things are dynamic. So a sales strategy is set based on the best information we have, but understand it's dynamic and can change on the fly as well. The components of the sales strategy, there's fundamentally 6 of them. There's lots of sub-elements, but I just want to categorize them. We're not going to go through them all today, only because we have an hour together, and that's not going to be possible to take you through every single one of them. But I'm going to focus in fundamentally on the first 3, which is about target markets and segments and what's necessary to extract maximum and optimal value associated with your target markets and segments. We'll talk about channel strategy. A lot of people think about the where or place from a marketing perspective, but it has just as much influence and just as much importance on the sales strategy itself, especially in a young company where channel sales and direct sales are managed by one and the same person. Maybe a CEO, maybe you have, and you're grown enough to actually have a director or VP of sales with you. And we'll talk about client analysis as well. And we'll come back at a later time to talk about sales processes. Just to let you know, we will not talk about sales organization, sales compensation in this particular chat, but I'm more than welcome to answer any questions as we go along. By the way, as we go along, if you need to, raise your hand, put a comment in the chat box. If you have a question, be glad to address those questions as we go along. I don't believe in necessarily saving up everything for the end. Okay. So I understand that we have a poll ready to go. So Carly, if you can flash that poll for everybody.
It is launched. First question. All right, almost everyone's participated. Looks like the majority are saying yes. 77% say yes. All right, that's the first poll. So 77% say yes, George.
Okay. I need to share, or are you sharing? Can we go to the next question as well then?
I can, just one moment. All right, folks, to question number 2. Answers coming in fast and furious, George. Majority so far saying yes, they do communicate their proposition statements through sales and marketing. Got a couple no's though.
Okay.
All right, I'm seeing 68% yes. 32%, 70% yes.
Very good.
I'll share
Let's
those
go to the
results
last
there for
question.
folks. Yeah, no problem. In question number 3. Responses coming in. We've got some people in the middle, some people more towards the top. Looks like a wide range.
Does indeed.
Okay, I think everyone's answered there. So
Okay,
share the
very
results
good.
here, folks. Yeah,
Very good.
majority say 3.
Yeah, so the results are not, not unusual in terms of the clients that I've talked to. I hope what you'll learn today, especially those who have difficulty around the value propositions in defining them for themselves, that you get some better guidance as to what that value proposition is. And I know it's important from being able to communicate that value proposition through all avenues and contact points with clients, whether that's your website, whether it's your marketing material, whether it's your presence at trade shows or discussion directly with clients. Whether it's sales, talking and making their sales pitches to prospective clients. You need to have those articulated very well, and I hope to show you a little bit of some samples of what that actually means, and I hope that defines and changes some of your approach in both understanding your value proposition and the second question around being able to communicate that. The last component is completely not surprising, that in terms of your ability to achieve revenue goals. You set in sight from a business plan perspective some goals and say, this is what I think is possible given the market size. And unfortunately, for a lot of small clients, small, medium-sized clients, they hope magic happens. And I don't mean to be trite about that. They say, well, I've figured all this out, therefore, why isn't it happening? And a lot of it has to do with sales engagement. All right, we'll talk a little bit about that and talk about your strategic plan is associated with your existing clients and strategies that you can invoke in order to take existing clients and potential future clients to the next level, all right, and grow your business and realize your revenue growth and your revenue goals in general. So from a target market perspective, let's go to the first section. All right, so Carly, is there a way, I see the poll still on my screen, is there a way to get rid of that? Hold on.
You should just be able to exit.
There we go. Okay, I managed to do it. So target markets and your ability to communicate and have your sales team and your marketing materials aligned to what your target markets and segmentation. I'm going to focus in on 4 key elements that I think are necessary for every company to define as part of their sales strategy. First one is around the ideal customer profile. Do we target, although we've defined it maybe generically in our business plan, have we fine-tuned exactly what kind of clients we need to do? So I'll take you through what an ideal customer profile looks like, a sample of that and the benefits of it. The second part is that when sales, we all understand that there are decision makers, decision influencers, somebody on the client end makes a decision as to whether your product, your service is of value to them and therefore will buy, all right, or therefore will contract with you in some way. But you need to understand who they are. Sales is very a very touch point and relationship perspective, all right? And therefore, you got to communicate both in sales and marketing to the language of your clients. That means you need to understand who your clients are. That means you need to understand buyer personas. And I'll take you through a sample and the benefits associated with that. Your sales team, your marketing team, it doesn't really matter. Your sales channels need to understand how you're different vis-a-vis your competition. So we'll talk a little bit about competitive positioning, and then we'll talk about value propositions as well. Carly, if there are questions, I'm looking to you to interrupt me and just say, George, how about, is there can you help answer this question?
Absolutely, will do.
All right, perfect. Ideal customer profile provides a laser focus for the sales and marketing team. Exactly what segments. We're not going after every market. We probably are not going to go after every segment, either geographically or from an industry perspective. We want to focus in on what we believe are the high value or quick turnarounds in terms of a sales perspective. Who are the first buyers? Who are going to be fast buyers for us? And where does our product and service resonate the highest, right? And so we need to identify who those, who those clients are. And the metric I typically use, or the grid I typically use, is understand clearly what industries or what segments of you're going to be targeting. You can't target everything. All right, you're too small. You don't have the kind of resources necessary to go after every component of the marketplace. Clearly decide what geographies you're focused on, right? Is it going to be just Canada? Is it going to be North America? Is it global in nature? All right. So what key geographies? It's important, at least, from a sample size, is think about the metrics that are going to make an ideal customer for you. Does the number of employees this customer have? Is that important? Is their annual budget for spend on the kind of things that you do important for you? Typically they are. The more salient ones are the bottom three, and that's what I want to focus some time on, is around what I consider the most salient things that you need to get right from an ideal customer profile perspective. The first one is you got to understand what your pain points are. What business problems, what business challenges does your product or service solve? Put yourself in the shoes of a client and say, if I bought this, how do I gain? What value do I receive associated with that? Second part is really understanding who that individual is. So who are the decision makers within your target clients? All right, clearly identify who they are. They might be C-level folks. They may be procurement managers. But understand who your buyers and the buyer titles they typically carry, and think about your decision makers in two fundamental areas: those that make business decisions and therefore can say yes to you, and those that can influence decisions and therefore can promote you within the company to get a closed deal. Summary on this point is very clear. Understand who you should target and put processes in place, both from your sales and marketing communications perspective, to target those specific industries or specific segments. Second is, what are the key pain points that you help address, and for who, because that's an important part from a decision maker perspective. And then lastly is the compelling events. This is why they should act. What things are happening on the client side that might be of impetus for them to act? And those are the compelling events. Okay. The second part of this section is around buyer personas. I highly recommend, and I've done it for several clients, where we take a look at each buyer persona, who by title, and you can put these generically, but think about your industry and the target segments that you've got. But who by name, by title, are they? And what's their typical background? What typical goals are they trying to achieve? And this links directly this title, what key pain points or business challenges they're trying to address. And I've got a sample one from one of my clients here that says, all right, how do we help? So having a sheet like this helps your sales team, helps your marketing team to ensure that they've got the right messaging going out and the right connection happening with the various market segment. My recommendation on buyer personas is build buyer personas for all your influencers and decision makers. And the reason is because in order to gain interest, you need to have messages that resonate with your target. And if you don't understand who your target is by title and by persona, you're going to have a difficult time translating value propositions into closed deals. For your business. And again, I'm reiterating, you need this in order to provide that laser focus of how your sales team and or channels are going to engage with clients. The last component, the third component, is around competitive positioning. And it's important that you just don't understand, that you not only understand what value proposition you're bringing to the table, but you're also understanding how you compare versus the competition. Listen, your buyers are people, and people will automatically gravitate towards a pigeonhole mentality. They're trying to understand your product and service. They're trying to formulate, is there value here for me? But they'll say things like, okay, you are a tech company in clean tech, and you solve this particular business challenge. They'll automatically try to pigeonhole you. Therefore, they'll even ask you who some of your competition is. And so that's how they get a relative perspective on the value that you bring to the table. So your team, from a marketing and sales perspective, but primarily your salespeople, need to understand how you position your key capabilities and your product features and value vis-a-vis competition. So you need to understand who your key competitors are. Your business plan typically understands that, typically articulates that to some degree. The sales strategy takes it one level further. All right. It says then, all right, so what are my strengths, weaknesses, and opportunities, threats against my competition, by competition, all right, for each competitor. All right. My suggestion is build a product service matrix, right, which is your product, your features, the value that you bring, and compare it against your competition. And the reason you want to do that is at the end, you want to identify what your competitive differentiators are vis-a-vis your competitors, because your clients are going to make that analysis. They're going to make that comparison point, and you're going to need to have answers for your client. All right. So how do you differentiate what you provide and the value that you provide differently than your competition? And here's some statistics in the marketplace, some key, what I consider key sales journals and organizations that go out and regularly poll clients about the sales mission. You take a look at some of these quotes. Number one inhibitor to sales achieving quota is the inability to communicate a value message. I'm not sure if you guys understand who or know who Serious Decision is, but they were a leader. In fact, were bought up by Forrester Research last year. But Serious Decisions is what I consider a leader in the sales and marketing messaging to the marketplace. Only 10% of decision makers, right? And we talked about the concept of the decision maker, said that sales calls, whether live, phone, email interaction, I'm talking about all interactions from a company perspective, provide enough value to warrant time spent with them. All right. So there's some very serious systemic fundamental issues if you don't have alignment with your ideal customer, your value proposition, and who you're talking to. You got to translate what your product and service does in the words of your client. All right. I want you to constantly be thinking about that. And that translation is what's going to be important. From competitive, and therefore that's how value propositions become important to your strategy as well. You need to clearly identify your value proposition. All right. So take the time. Here's a specific client. They are targeting the industrial processing and manufacturing sectors. They are a supply chain, what's referred to as third-party logistics provider. That's what 3PL stands for. All right. And so what we target here is say, all right, some key points. What is the high-level pain or gain point that we address? This particular client talks about supply chain costs. All right. And being able to manage your costs. All right. They provide this to a very specific industry. All right. So we have that denotes or connotes that we got very, very specific expertise in this particular industry. And we accomplish that with, here's our differentiator vis-a-vis our competition, where we're located, and our operating model provides better cost efficiencies than our competition. All right. The last component, which is important, is you've got to be able to articulate that story with proof points. Which clients will you showcase or generically showcase to say, we work with your industry, we work with you, your title in other companies, and we've solved these kinds of business problems before. So that provides the bona fides and credibility for you to move to engage in a further discussion or open up a new opportunity with with a client. All right. Does that make sense to everybody? Let me pause there for a second. Any questions, Carly?
Don't see any in the chat, but if folks do have questions, feel free to either put them in the chat and I'll voice them to George, or raise your virtual Zoom hand, which you can find at the very bottom of your screen when you click reactions, and I will call on you.
All right. At the risk of sounding a little controversial, most sales and strategies, most books will talk about the intersection of value parity. And the intersection, you look at three circles here. You've got your prospect or your prospective clients or markets, your company and your products on the down furthest to the left and bottom of the graph here, and then your competitors. All right, the intersection or confluence of the three, most people will tell you that's where you should focus, and I'm saying you should not focus there. That in fact sets you at parity with everybody else, and therefore it will devolve, and I guarantee you this, it will devolve into a pricing game if you are going to be considered. And you don't want to play the pricing game. You want to play the value game as much as possible and get fair value back in terms of a deal with your client. All right. My suggestion to you is look how you can sway client decisions or client conversations to the zone that intersects prospects and your company. And that's where value differentiation comes in. All right. Clients want to know how you will deliver benefits to them. Then it becomes very personal. It becomes highly customized. So sales is not about generic selling. All right. There are repeatable processes. There are repeatable sort of sales tactics and pitches you can make, but it's highly, highly personal. Who are you talking to? Right? What key business problems or business challenges do they have? How does that particular person relate in your products and service? How do they internalize what you can provide for them? So look how you can be different than your competition. Yes, you answer the same, maybe high-level business problem, but here's how we do it differently. And I want you to focus in on those. That's my suggestion, and that's got to be articulated in your sales strategy. Your value differentiators could involve several different factors, and it's a lot more than there are here. It could be, what return on investment does my capability provide my client? All right. What total cost of ownership, TCO, can my client expect as a result of working with me? All right. Do I provide superior supply and execution capabilities vis-a-vis my competition? Do I supply subject matter expertise that my competition doesn't have? And therefore, there's an inherent trust mechanism and confidence mechanism that client can look to you and say, I like this company. This provides far different capabilities than generic views or generic comparison points vis-a-vis competition. And the last thing, don't forget this, is that sometimes it's support superiority. In other words, you are there to manage the relationship, solve problems for the client associated with orders, associated with product fit, associated of customizing that product for their particular purposes. If you provide superior service to that, then you need to articulate that. I'm just giving you some prompters here of where you should focus. So key message here, focus on the value differentiation segment, not on value parity. All right, I hope that is important for everybody.
George, I'm just going to pop in with a question in the chat.
Yes.
Do you have a sample of the product/service matrix?
Yes, I do. I can provide that for everybody. All right. And so,
George, are you still there?
understand what these features.
George, sorry, George, you froze and disappeared for a little bit, so you might want to go back about a couple of sentences.
Okay.
You just kind of disappeared.
What I said is, do not focus strictly on feature and function of your product or service. All right. Many clients will know how to a priori internalize that for themselves. My suggestion is prompt that conversation. Say specifically within your product or service matrix vis-a-vis your competition, where are you different? This will provide communication to your clients, to your markets, both from a sales and marketing perspective, but more importantly, provide focus internally into your organization from a sales perspective to say, this is how we're different. These are the value elements. These are the benefit value elements. These are the pain points we address and how we address them differently than our competition. So a product service matrix is not simply a feature function comparison point. Okay, it gives guidance to sales and marketing to say, here's how we differentiate ourselves and identify that value differentiation as per the diagram that you see here.
Wonderful. We also had another question in the chat, George.
Sure.
If we focus on value differentiation,
Mhm.
is it therefore best to not have a competitive chart on the initial pitch deck?
Yes, it is not. Your first pitch to clients should be first part before you see a new client, research the hell out of them. All right. Understand who they are, understand what potential business problems they may have or business pain points, understand what value potentially they could achieve in working with your company and your products and services. Understand who you're talking to, what's their background. Understand what kind of clients you've solved that particular problem or potential problem before, so you can relate stories in your conversation and communication with them. Your first discussion point is to set the stage to say, this is our value proposition. We do it for your kind of title in your kind of customer and your kind of segment. That's the only thing you're going to position. The next conversation is going to be, but that's what we do generically. I need to understand a little bit more about you as a client. That's more of how to execute a sales call, which we're not going to touch on here. And that's more mechanics of a sales call or mechanics of a sales conversation with clients. But you want to immediately turn to the customer telling you what they're struggling with. All right.
Perfect. That's all the questions so far, George.
Okay, good. All right, we're going to turn our attention to the next page, which is around channel strategy. Unfortunately, what I've seen in most cases is that sales strategy devolves into how do I build and manage and put the processes in place for a sales team. I am here to tell you that's not it. All right, that is one fundamental component. And I think it's part of overall strategy, especially on sales strategy, especially in small, medium-sized companies where often channels and sales, direct sales are run by a single area or a single functional area. I need you to start thinking about your channels more proactively, and they should be, these are the segments I want to go after. These are the clients and titles I want to go after and I want to communicate to. And this is where they are. And therefore, what is my best channel to actually do that? And you can see here, there's more than one channel, folks. All right, you need to be clear about what kind of clients through what channel you're going to be dealing with. So, channel strategy, in my estimation, is core to sales strategy, at least for a small, medium-sized company. Larger companies, and I've had the pleasure from a timeline perspective, working with some very large companies like IBM, where I started my career, and Equifax, another large company, and they have the benefit through millions of dollars, sometimes billions of dollars, of revenue, where they can actually separate these two groups. Small, medium-sized companies. And this is directly related to my experience with two startups that I led, DMTI Spatial and Platform Computing. Both of them, those areas reported into me. I had the responsibility for deciding how we're going to attack the market, how we're going to position our capabilities and value propositions via what channel. I'll share some key examples with you. Key point is your channel strategy is core and is important to your overall sales strategy. You need to understand it, all right? In fact, I would recommend that you build another matrix, all right? And that matrix should include, here's my business plan and my revenue growth target. Here are the key segments I'm going after. Here are the products I'm going to position with these key segments. And by the way, here are the channels I'm going to use to get there. All right? That should form part of your overall sales strategy. All right. So I'm asking you to think about your capabilities, your company, your product and services, and think about it in two fundamental dimensions. First dimension along the horizontal axis is, what degree of market access do I have? All right. The second part in the vertical axis is, how complex, all right, is commercialization going to be for my product and service? It can be simple. I got a very simple value proposition, therefore it's not difficult for me to articulate what I do, and I don't need necessarily to spend huge marketing effort in order to communicate that. Or do I have a very complex solution that fits in with maybe 2 or 3 other solutions, or requires high degree of customization with my clients? Therefore, my degree of knowledge and contact with that client is going to be that much more important, and therefore higher in terms of its complexity. So think about it in 2 dimensions. Take your products and services, think about your value propositions, think about your access to markets and decision makers, and then decide what channel is optimal in order to go after that. You can see here that direct sales, and by corollary inside sales and maybe just strict online sales, is about 2 channels. All right. There might be opportunities where you don't have that high level of market access. And I'm thinking about retail specifically. You have a product, could be a food product that you will typically distribute through an intermediate channel, such as a distributor, or maybe directly with the Sobeys and Loblaws. The end client is the consumer in that particular case. You don't have the wherewithal nor heft to go directly to the consumer. You have some degree, perhaps with Amazon-like sales or direct online, but the high volume is going to be typically garnered through use of a distributor. All right. Let me give you a practical example here. So when I led DMTI Spatial, we had a commercial products group that reported into me that I led. We had clients distributed across Canada, so we were focused on Canada. That was our geography. But we had, I'd say our top, 40 clients probably generated 80% of our revenue. And then the balance of our clients, and they numbered in the hundreds, delivered the balance of the revenue for us. But they were small. They were small transactions. They were episodic. They didn't always happen. It wasn't a recurring revenue stream in any way, shape, or form. All right. And so it didn't make a lot of economic sense and profitability sense for us to be building a sales group that directly sold into these kinds of companies. So one of the channels we ended up using was agents. And agents got paid much like a sales rep. It was purely a commission role. They got 100% commission, but their job was to position our capabilities locally to remote geographies, remote clients, small clients, but we clearly understood where we're going to use what channel for what kind of client as well. I want you to think about that for your particular business when you're developing your sales strategy. The benefits of a sales strategy, it offers you greater market reach. All right, so you define the market in your business plan, but you're not necessarily going to be able to attack that entire market directly. All right, you will probably need some form of partnership in a reseller, a distributor, in order to get to remote regions. It allows you to service remote clients more effectively. Geographically remote, perhaps, that you're not able to do that. I'll give you another example. When I was at Platform Computing back in the late 90s, we had a value proposition that allowed clients to recognize huge return on investment by reusing some very expensive software. Right? They would do things like animation at Disney, as an example, or animation through Lucasfilm or any of that, but it was in California. And we were a small company out of Toronto, all right? It was no way that we we're going to be able to build those direct relationships, but we found a business partner who already sold other products directly into that entertainment industry. And we were successful in almost doubling our revenues as a result of building a channel relationship with a company called Cord Systems, all right? So revenue growth and revenue acceleration is not, I have to do it on my own approach. Think about your channel, all right? I hope that example is helpful. Eventually what we did, though, as we grew bigger, We ended up buying that business partner because we wanted that direct relationship with that client, but it gave us an in to a market that otherwise we could only attack from an inside sales perspective. And it was far too expensive at the time, given the company size we were, to actually hire somebody remotely in California. All right. It provides higher efficiencies for the right size client. That's why I recommend, understand your overall business plan and how your revenue is going to be separated by segment and by product and by channel. And it allows you to service those clients at a much better level than you otherwise would by trying to do it remotely on your own or directly through the company. It actually removes costs from it. There's a downside to this, though. The aspect of removing costs for you, you get more revenue. That's good. Okay. But in order to get more revenue, you're going to have to discount that product through a partner in some way. Either you're going to have to pay commissions, or you're going to have to discount it from your normal manufacturer retail suggested price in order to actually get them, because there's got to be some profit into them. So you will discount it. If you sold something normally at $100, you'll sell something to a distributor at $50 or $60, and they get the market up to the end market, but you get the benefit of accessing revenue that you otherwise wouldn't do. You're going to get $60 on the dollar, on the $100 versus the pure 100, but it actually removes significant sales and marketing costs from you, because your channel partner is actually going to take that on as part of their mission to sell your product through them. So while it does decrease potential gross margin for you, understand it removes sales, general, and administrative costs, and therefore improves your bottom line profitability. All right. It does reduce gross margin, but offers higher net margins at the end of the day and higher revenue streams. All right. So please do not ignore channel strategy. The way you would take this is, and I've already talked about this, review your overall revenue growth objectives. Ensure you understand your target market segments from your business plan and through the earlier exercise we did around ideal customer profile, value proposition, buyer personas, etc. Understand via that grid that I positioned earlier is where you have market access and where you do not, where it's costly to build it and where it is not, especially from a commercialization perspective. And ensure that you align your revenue growth goals and your revenue targets by channel in order to as compared and as aligned to the target market and segments you're trying to go after. Let me pause there. Any questions, Carly?
I don't see any questions in the chat, but if anyone has any.
So that's either a sign I'm confusing the hell out of people, or this is, or people are saying, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I hope it's the latter, but please speak up if you do have questions. The last component I'm going to go into is around client analysis, and this actually dumbfounds me in terms of a lot of companies, and big companies are prone to it just as much as small, medium-sized companies. The mantra always seems to be is, in order for me to grow, I need to find more clients. I'm here to tell you that's not your first best strategy. Your first best strategy is to understand your existing clients and how to retain them and how to grow them. So think about it from a matrix such as I have, in front of you here to say, and by the way, just by way of background, if you want to get deeper into this, this is referred to as an Ansoff matrix, ANSOFF. Igor Ansoff actually published this. And I know maybe I'm dating myself a little bit, but it was published in the Harvard Business Review in 1957. But it is as relevant today as it was back then. All right. It is a methodology and an approach that you can understand strategically from a product development perspective, but also be used from a sales context. All right. So let me explain that. On the left-hand side, on the horizontal axis is we talk about your existing products and services, or your products and services, whether they're existing or net new. And on the vertical axis, it talks about your clients, either existing clients or net new clients. As most of you will obviously have your existing clients in some way, shape, or form. Okay, you're in the bottom left. They represent your lowest risk in terms of business investment. You know these clients, they bought for you, presumably they've received value for you. Therefore, you have an opportunity to get closer to them and win more business. All right. So that's point one. That's your least riskiest business strategy you can undertake, and certainly your least riskiest sales strategy you can undertake. The next one, next level up, is go sell some new product that you've developed or brought to market to those same clients. So how do I maximize revenue associated with my existing clients? Go out and say, can I position new capabilities? I don't have to go through first principles anymore to prove my bona fides as a customer or as a vendor. I don't have to go through the process of proving to the client again about my credibility and my ability to deliver value. They're an existing client. They're actually going to be open to having a discussion with you about a new product, right? It is far easier to take a look at your existing client set and position your capabilities to that existing client set, either in the form of selling more of what you got, larger orders, or selling net new products that you've developed and have brought to market, because your existing clients are going to be your first best testers of the value associated with those products, and the most likely to trust you that they're going to provide value. So before you go anywhere else, before you say, I need to spend $100,000 on a client acquisition strategy, I'm going to question you. Do you really? Do you really? All right. Most of the clients that have been spending time most recently, we've done an analysis of their existing client sets and their existing, they've not surprisingly, they've got some very large customers that provide the dominance of the revenue. I'll go through in a little bit more detail in a second. But they have a high number of clients overall, vast preponderance. In fact, 80% of their individual clients, right, representing 20% of the revenues. Yet they somehow think that my key to sales growth is acquiring new clients. All right.
Hey, George, I just want to pop in with a comment from the chat. Fitting from Mary Jane from FitFu. Repeat customers are the best. Fortune is in the follow-up. Plus, ask existing clients for referrals.
Yes, absolutely. From a marketing perspective, is that, it provides the bona fides. And remember how we talked about earlier about your unique differentiation. If you can relate direct client stories of how you've proven this versus, your competitor who may have generic capabilities and describe and they position value parity, you have a unique selling proposition. You have a differentiator that you can win more business. So absolutely, you should be exploiting your existing client set for referrals, for case studies, all right, for testimonials. Absolutely. So I've talked about some of these key strategies, but let me delve into it a little bit more. And I encourage you to think about your strategies, sales strategies for your particular business in this context, in these four quadrants. Again, on the bottom left-hand side in customer retention is, you want to move to, you've already had maybe an initial footprint with a client, but if you and you've built some initial kind of relationship, the opportunity for you is to delve a little bit deeper in conversations with that client. Are they actually buying similar capabilities from a competitor of yours? Are they actually spending money, this is sometimes referred to as share of wallet, with others that they could be, in theory, spending with you? Think about strategies for this group of where you can be the sole sourcer. How can you earn the right to say, listen, I will provide to you all these capabilities, and I'll provide you all the product you can possibly take. You don't need to work with my competition. In fact, I am so confident that we can do this for you that I'm willing to put a volume and pricing algorithm before you, all right, that says if you commit to a certain level of ordering or a certain level of revenue, I'm willing to provide more value to you in the forms of price discount, all right? And don't forget in your last one, especially if you have a recurring revenue stream kind of business, is reduce your, take a look at clients that are leaving you and you want to reduce their churn. You don't want to lose those clients. So how do, what are strategies to reduce that churn? How do I, how do I ensure that they renew with me and continue, continue recurring revenue streams, with me as a company? On the right-hand side, as I said before, is where are my opportunities with existing clients to cross-sell, All right, so you've heard, I am sure, upsell, cross-sell. Upsell is on the bottom left-hand quadrant. Cross-sell is on the right-hand quadrant. It says new capabilities, new products I can sell to my existing clients. Here's where you may think about strategies like bundling products together and say, if you buy these two together, here's the benefits, here's the pricing you can expect from us, as opposed to pricing transactionally for each and every net new product that you have out there. I would encourage you to, as with net new products, think about how you can become a vendor of record. And that's what vendor listing is about. How can you become a vendor of record for a broader menu choice, especially true if you're dealing with government. So, if you're going through government procurement and you are on a vendor approved list and you've gone through the approvals necessary, especially through PWGSC, don't worry about the acronym, it's their central buying group. In the government, what else should I be putting in there? Give them a menu of choices, right? So provide more capabilities, not just what you're selling them today. And what I'd suggest is, especially on your new products, is employ ABM. ABM is not automated banking machine. ABM is account-based marketing. All right. This is not generic marketing. This is specific messaging and marketing to specific accounts, to specific account titles within those accounts. That's what ABM is. All right. So think about that. That's how you're going to position new capabilities, new products that you can position with your clients. If, on the other hand, you've gone through that and say, listen, I can't possibly make my revenue growth goals solely on existing clients, I can take a look at customer acquisition. That's your next level of risk going after, right? It's certainly riskier in the first two I've described, but it is something that, at some respect, we're going to do some client acquisition. That's what takes companies ultimately from $1 million to $3 million to $6 million to $20 million. All right. So you will have, I'm not saying don't do customer acquisition, just put it in its proper place in terms of what your expectations from new client acquisition are. And the key strategies here is for new client acquisition, displace competitors. That should be your primary strategy. Right. So think about clients that use your kinds of your products and services, but they don't work with you. They work with your competition. All right. Clearly identify who those ideal customers are in there. Employ, again, account-based marketing techniques in order to get to them, but position your sales strategies around displacing the competition. Okay. Either through better service, better pricing, better support, etc. What are your unique differentiators? That's what you should do. This should not be sometimes I refer to as a spray and pray effect. Do not take marketing strategies and go out and say, I want to get into this particular segment. Look for adjacencies. All right. Most companies, in fact, do look for adjacencies to their existing segments and say, well, the business problems are similar. The business challenges are similar. Therefore, let me reface what my value proposition is for these specific segments. All right. So it is always an extension of your core business. That's the best best approach and higher likelihood of success. On the upper right-hand quadrant, I would strongly encourage you not to go after this in a direct fashion in any way, shape, or form. If there is an opportunity to position net new product with net new clients, and this could be a new geography, quite frankly, that you don't have presence in today, or it might be a competitor that will allow you to get to the market. Here's where things like merger and acquisition strategies may come into play. Here's where you may deal with a partner to do some joint market development. And work with them to go jointly to develop that to that market. We did that with DMTI. We struck an agreement with a UK-based firm to represent us in Europe, but we did so concurrently. We had a channel manager on our end that was responsible for making joint calls with that firm in the UK to penetrate the European market. But we weren't going to set up a UK division for our product. It was just too complex, too costly, and we didn't know enough about the market to see if the value proposition was viable. So we took a low-risk strategy, even pointing to that. Sometimes it will require investment in a net new sales team, which means setting up a new division in Europe. different regulations, different government requirements and compliance things may exist in different geographic regions, which means you need to have feet in the street or local presence in order to understand your clients and understand the requirements to be successful. I also want you to take a one step further analysis of your clients. All right. So, the prior analysis and discussion points that I've talked to is about your overall business and where existing clients are. I've done some work for a couple of clients around actually looking at the revenue streams over the past few years. There is something that most of you have heard and people talk about, which is, my top 20% of my clients deliver 80% of my revenues. My bottom 80% of my clients deliver 20% of the revenues. That's referred to as the Pareto principle of businesses. And you know what? It is largely true, right? And if you take a look at this particular sample here, you can see a couple things. Over in this particular case, top 20%. It's a smaller company, so it's not perfectly Pareto principle. The top 24% of clients delivered 53% of the overall revenue in this particular sample. The bottom 20% delivered 40% in this particular case. Okay, your top clients will represent your largest order sizes. They will represent, within the context of existing clients, your top opportunity to grow your revenues. All right. So, it's automatically pointing to an exercise here that I'll get to in a second is, you have to categorize your existing clients. Who of them are providing your biggest revenue streams, your biggest order sizes, your biggest revenue per year perspective. All right. You need to take a look at that. They also represent your highest opportunity for growth because you understand them already and you don't have to rebuild the value proposition nor the company bona fides and credibility in order to position net new capabilities with them. Okay. They also offer the best opportunity for you to actually improve your sales conversion ratios. Think about what a sales cycle looks like with an existing client where you're either trying to upsell them or cross-sell them to versus a client you've never met before. That sales cycle is going to be, a lot shorter in the first case than the second case. All right. So it allows, and you don't have to take the time to build, again, your credibility and bona fides with that client, which means your sales cycle is shortened, but the aspects of the value proposition and understanding the business problems and business pains you can address is incredibly shortened, and your likelihood of conversion between one step of the sales process, which Anne will take you through in a little bit more intimate detail in the next section, those conversion rates can actually go up. All right. So my encouragement to you is to take a look at your existing clients and stratify them to A, B's, and C accounts. All right. Your A accounts are those that probably deliver 50% of your overall revenues. Your B accounts are the next ones who have potential to be A's, all right, but are not quite there yet, right, and deliver the next 30% of your revenues. Your C clients are everybody else that typically make up 80% of your total clients. And what you'll also understand is that on the left-hand side, you have large discrete clients with large order sizes and large transactions. On the right-hand side, in your C accounts, you have a lot of little transactions and a lot of episodic selling happening on that are worth very tiny dollars. All right. That has some very real connotations and issues associated with how you address that marketplace. All right. And from a strategy perspective, what you want to focus in on with your A accounts is this is where direct sales makes most sense. You probably want to have an account manager, a dedicated senior account manager for your largest accounts, or two, depending on how many you have. All right. Here's where you are going to look for opportunities of how you grow more business and share a wallet with a client. Think about sole sourcing kinds of opportunities. Think about how you might displace your competitors. Here's where you're going to position some of your new products you've brought to marketplace. This is where the best avenue for positioning those capabilities and products will be. Are you sure within your largest clients you've identified all the DMUs? DMUs, by the way, stands for decision-making units. All right. A lot of bigger clients have lots of divisions, lots of different functional areas, and you might have different buyer persona and buyers within your existing client. Have you really understood how many decision makers are within your client, within your existing clients? This is why an account manager is necessary. They need to analyze that account and see where else I should be having conversations. It's a lot easier to be referred by an existing vice president within your existing clients to another vice president than it is to try to cold call them on your own. All right.
George, I'm just going to pop in with a question. Sorry to interrupt. When you do client analysis, how do you determine value of clients if they signed on recently and therefore you don't have a full year of sales yet? Do you wait to rank these clients until you've engaged them for at least a year?
Well, I'd say then you take a look at what potential they might have, right? So are they a small client on your end? So if you take a look back at your ideal customer profile, do they represent the kind of client that can grow fully into an A? You probably can't classify them as A's yet. And maybe if you're small enough, you don't have any A's yet. And that's okay. But understand what you need to do with those that have the potential to be an A. And they might be a B today, which is to have a lot of potential to say, hey, listen, I can get more business with these guys. But you're not going to do it with marketing campaigns. It's going to be relationship. You need to have a conversation with them. You need to have a relationship built with them in order to understand if they could be an A. Right? That'd be my recommendation. All right. With your Bs, it's going to be about thinking about, maybe your strategy here from a coverage perspective is junior salespeople, if it's going to be in field or on, feet on the street kind of approach from a sales perspective, or it might be inside sales. All right. So, I'd strongly encourage inside sales, and especially in today's, post-COVID world, there's a lot more virtual selling happening than in the street as well. So, think about inside sales. Your goal with your B accounts is, quite frankly, to understand what you should do or how you should position them to see if you can develop them into A accounts over time. They're your next logical source of A accounts in order to scale your business. All right. And here, think about how you can, you can displace, competition. They buy more from you. Think for opportunities to grow their average order size. How can they buy more from you? All right. And increase the number of orders, with you. Those are the kind of strategies you should be thinking about. Your C ones, by contrast, are, you want to automate the hell out of this one as much as possible. All right. And, any accounts that are in your C area, think about within that C group, are there any B potential based, again, in comparison to your ideal customer profile and target segments? Can any of them develop into a B? And maybe I don't want to take them on a fully automated approach, but for the balance of them, think about how they can be self-serve. One of the clients I'm dealing with is, in fact, gone through this exact same exercise and said, a lot of my small clients, guys, I just want to turn them to a website and pick and choose product they want and put it in a cart and sign, and make an online purchase. We have the processes to actually deliver on that. But the business and the process associated with C clients doesn't end there. If you do automate these folks, you should regularly monitor them to say which one is actually increasing because they're seeing value in my products. Perhaps it's time I develop a personal relationship with them than simply having a transactional or arm's length relationship with them. Maybe I need to build it, but you need to constantly be monitoring that. So in the C accounts, I am not saying ignore them. I am saying use your best, most efficient, and profitable means to service them, but you also got to constantly monitor them to see, do they deserve more service or a higher level of service going forward? So continually monitor those in order to make that decision. There are going to be, and I guarantee you, clients in your C accounts that you shouldn't be doing business with. And this actually, takes away, and I know it's anathema to a lot of people, but I don't want to lose an existing client, but some of them are just not worth it. They cause more pain in terms of support, complaints, etc. Maybe they don't pay on time, whatever the case is. where thinking about divorcing them might be an option. Identify those proactively in your sales strategy. Last component, I'm just going to touch on sales process. Anne's going to take you through a lot more detail around this, but sales process, think about it from a pipeline or a funnel perspective. Sales process is all about key stages or key steps you take in order to close new business. Your sales efforts, whatever they may be, need to align with what your revenue and revenue goals are. So if my business plan calls for a 20% year-over-year growth and calls for being successful in this particular market segment, your sales process is going to mimic that. It'll translate itself into quotas. It will translate itself into commissions. And by the way, it'll also translate itself as where you think growth is going to come by from your channel strategy that I talked about earlier. All right. The nuances of a sales process, the details, represent a core component of sales conversion and offers an integral capability for you to accelerate sales and scale within your company. And we'll spend a lot more time on this later this afternoon. I just want to simply introduce it. So, from a summary perspective, I know I've talked a lot. Spent better part of an hour chatting with you about some key things that are necessary as part of the sales strategy, but I want to summarize that to some degree. I think the most important part of the sales strategy is you as a business clearly need to understand where you're going to focus. What are your target markets? What are your target segments you're going after? All right. I hope the tools like ideal customer profile, value propositions, competitive matrix, competitive positioning and strategy are helpful with this, because it actually touches both what your sales communications are going to be, but also touches your marketing, including your website collateral and website content as well. I think that ensuring that you've got the right channel strategy and optimal channel mix is a key to growing revenue sales. So don't think that sales automatically equals direct sales force. It does not. So ensure that you align your revenue growth and revenue targets with key segments and key channels you're going to use to address those segments. The two most important parameters you need to think about is what access do I have into the marketplace and how complex is that sale really? Do I need to actually be direct with a client, or do I actually need other third parties to help me position capabilities? Lastly, I would encourage you to thoroughly understand who your existing client set is, because they represent your lowest risk and highest potential for revenue growth. All right. Selling more of what you got to your existing clients, selling new products to your existing clients represent your highest potential and your lowest risk. All right. And hopefully I've imparted some thoughts around for you about where client acquisition strategies fit within your overall strategy. But take a look at your existing clients, categorize them as A, B's, and C's. Think about some of the generic strategies I've left with you today of how to address and spend time with your A accounts versus your B versus your C accounts. And that should take you, and will take you, proactively managed to scaling your business to $1 million and beyond.
Wonderful. Thanks so much, George, for taking us through sales strategy. We appreciate your expertise. We do have time for maybe one or two questions. So if anyone has a question they'd like to put in the chat, or if you want to raise your virtual Zoom hand, give folks a second. Comment in the chat. Thanks so much for the information. All right. I'm not seeing any questions in the chat there, George. So again, thank you so much for your time and your expertise.
All right.
Welcome back, everybody. Hope you had a good restful break, had a chance to stretch, grab a little snacks. I know I had some grapes. And you're going to have another chance to connect after the educational piece, as Carly had mentioned a little bit earlier. So if you've just joined us, welcome. But we're going to move on to the next educational piece with Anne Toner-Fung. So I'd like to introduce Anne. Some of you may have met her already. She is our previous Chief Executive Officer of Innovation Guelph and a current mentor at Innovation Guelph, who will be taking us through sales process and why a defined process is necessary to scaling. So Anne has over 30 years of successful development of people and organizations owned, operated, and managed. She is a strong relationship builder with a demonstrated track record of business and organizational development in the private and not-for-profit sectors, developing and implementing growth strategies powered by high-performance teams and transformational leadership. Anne is a co-founder and angel investor with a current focus on helping SMEs, small medium enterprises, accelerate growth and achieve a competitive advantage by overcoming strategic and operational challenges. So Anne, the floor is yours.
Well, hi everybody. I would love it if most of you could turn on your cameras so I could see who I'm, hey Marta, who I'm talking to. And while I probably won't have you doing ho, 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 ha, 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 I would absolutely hope and love if we could have a little bit of a conversation today and a little bit of interaction. So yeah, I'd just like to start by introducing myself. Now, George got into the sales strategy, which is awesome. And he went into a lot of detail on that. And I'm sure most of you have got your brains kind of churning on all the different pieces that he was looking at. And I'm going to be looking more specifically at sales process. And much like George, I spent a lot of my career working in different companies, doing a lot of sales in various capacities. I've worked in startups and large corporations, again, much like George, but I would attribute the failure of my first company, which was a construction company, and it was many, many years ago. I was in my 20s, and I would attribute the failure of that company to the lack of a sales process, the lack of a sales function in general. It was, as I said, a construction company, and we got all of our business through referrals. And that was awesome. And it was so gratifying that we didn't really have to go chasing business. Problem is, we got hit by an economic downturn. We got hit by the introduction of the HST, which was the GST at the time. We got hit by an increase in the EHT, or actually the introduction of the EHT, the employer health tax, and an increase in CPP and EI premiums all at once. And then the provincial government, there was an election and the NDP moved in, and the first thing that they did was put in rent controls. So all of those first things killed the new construction industry, and the rent controls killed the reno industry. And so all of a sudden, there was no business and all those referrals died, and we literally did not have a sales function or a sales process because we never needed one. As a result, we had to shut that business down. So today's conversation is about why you need a sales process. No matter what kind of business you're in, you need some kind of a defined sales process. And I'm going to share my screen briefly and look at, kind of review the objectives of today's session. And I am going to be kind of bouncing back and forth between sharing my screen and not as we go through this, because as I said, I kind of like to see faces. And let's see, sharing screen. Do you see that lovely Rhyze Up slide? Is that what everybody sees? Great.
I'm seeing your notes though.
You're seeing notes as well. Okay, that's interesting. Do you see why you need a sales process?
Yes, but we also see the next slide.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, you're not supposed to see the next slide. Okay, let me stop sharing and try that again. We always have, when there's multiple screens, it's always such a fun time to make sure the correct screen is being shared. Screen 2, let's try that again, share. Is that it?
You got it.
So why you need a sales process. This is what we're going to be talking about today, why we're here. Basically, just to better understand what a sales process is and isn't. Understand why you need one, regardless of the business model and the type of business you're in, although sales processes might be different depending on the type of business you have. And also just talking a little bit about how the right sales process can impact your business. So we're going to be looking at the elements of your current sales process, whether you have a defined one or if it's a little more ad hoc. Think about how effective your current sales process is, and then identifying potential areas for improvement. So that's essentially what we're going to try and accomplish today. And I want to start by doing a couple of questions, just like George did at the beginning, a couple of poll questions. And Carly's going to help me set those up. I'm also going to attempt to utilize the pause sharing function and see if it works the way I hope it works. So when I pause sharing, do you guys no longer see my screen share? Or do you still see the slides?
We still see the why you need a sales process slide, but if you open up something else, we won't be able to see it.
Okay, all right. So I'm just going to actually be a little bit more arbitrary and go back and forth between sharing and not sharing, because I really like to see people's faces. It's much more comforting to me to be able to see who the heck I'm talking to. So if we could, thank you, Carly, that was lovely. If we could do the first of the two poll questions, Carly? Okay. So do you have a sales process?
All right. I think a majority of folks have answered their Ann.
Okay, so we have 56% who say they have a clear sales process and 44% who say they do not. So that's kind of a half and half, which is not a bad place to start. Okay. All right. So did everybody see those results come up? Great. So that's interesting because it doesn't surprise me at all, although I think it would surprise George. George, are you still here? No? Okay, so most of you said you had a sales strategy, but we've got almost a half and half split among those who have a clearly defined sales process. So good place to start. And the second question. So if you do have a sales process and you know you definitely have a sense of what that is it written down? Is it documented somewhere? And was it documented before the pre-work? Okay. Are we close to everybody answer yet? No, we still have a few.
We got one or two, yep.
Okay. All right, so all right, we're getting a 40-60 split on this. So 40% are saying yes, they have it documented. And this, remember, this is of about the half that said they had a sales process. So about a little less than half of those have it documented somewhere. Awesome. Okay, so clearly this is an area that that maybe needs a little bit of work in terms of sales process and what you have and what you don't have in place. So I'd like to ask, and I'm really hoping that you'll kind of chime in a little bit here and give me a sense of how it went when you were asked to do the pre-work and you were asked to think about your sales process and go through that and jot down some notes. How was that? How did that work for you? Who wants to tell me a little bit about what that was like? Huh? Marta, can I pick on you because I know you?
Yes, and I was just about to put up my hand.
Perfect.
So it was a really good time to sit and think about it, and then wonder what I'm missing. What am I missing in my process, and do I have a complete process, or was I just able to think about just what it is that I do on a day-to-day basis when it comes to sales?
Okay. And what was your conclusion about that?
That there's definitely room for improvement, and that I could learn something.
Okay.
And I've been in sales for a long time, but I was in sales for somebody else. So now, I have to think about the process. So it's different.
Right. Okay. And when you were in sales for somebody else, were you given a defined sales process to follow?
No, I wasn't.
Interesting.
I wasn't.
Okay.
No, we talked about goals. We talked about targeting certain clients, about growing business within a client and things like that, but never a full sales process. No.
Okay. Interesting. Anybody else want to share some feelings, thoughts they had? Did they find it confusing, difficult? Katrina, what do you think?
We were lucky because we were working with Britt over the last month to put together a sales process, and we were ready to go. But before that, it was a really eye-opening thing for me because I had always been doing the sales for our company. And again, a lot of it was referrals and relationship, were coming in. And then when I just hired a salesperson, we realized, first of all, we might have to be looking at our product market fit. There were some of these issues that, people were coming to work with us because of our prior relationships. But when we actually want to be scaling as a business, we needed to put these things down and make a plan and really evaluate it, because what worked for me as a founder and just sort of talking to people did not work for other staff members. So that's what I learned over the process.
All right. Awesome. Great. Any other thoughts or comments about the process and what that exercise may or may not have triggered in your mind?
Oh, I have something.
Okay.
So I wasn't totally sure. We had the sales process to prospecting all the way through to signing off on a contract. And I just wasn't sure and confident that the sales process technically ends there. So there's more work that's done afterwards. And I wasn't sure when we said sales process, how far do we take that? Because we do have a process to renew clients as well. So just kind of a thought that I had.
Okay, no, that's a great one. And it's true that generally speaking, when you look at a sales process or you talk to somebody about a sales process or you're working through the exercise of defining it, in most cases, you will see that they'll stop at the close. They'll stop at, okay, a sale is secured. But you make an excellent point. And to tie back to what George was saying about your best opportunities are often your existing customers. So maybe there's a place for a sales process, right? So there's the sales process, then there's the renewal sales process, then there's the nurturing of an existing relationship and how do you upsell and increase the share of wallet and all of those things that he was talking about with respect to your strategy. So you make a very good point, Stephanie, that it doesn't necessarily stop with the close. I spent a lot of my career in sales, and I used to say, instead of closing a sale, open a relationship, because that to me was the crux of it all, right? Was that how do you then maintain that relationship and maintain the sales? Okay, great. So I'm glad that the pre-work actually made you think a little bit, and maybe for some was a little uncomfortable. It was meant to be. So this is where we learn, is when we actually question what we're already doing and dig a little deeper and try and figure out how to do it better or do more. So great. I'd like to, before we kind of jump into more details, I would like to ask all of you to share with me, if there was one thing that you could get from today's session, what would it be? Who would like to start? Surely you come in with an expectation when you come to a session like this. What is one thing you would like to go away with today that would make you feel, okay, this was a good use of time?
I'll answer that, Anne, for me.
Yeah.
And I would like to get a full understanding or a full step-by-step of what is a sales process, and making sure that I'm not missing any of the steps in my processes.
Okay. Catherine, you also put your hand up.
Yeah, for me, it is like having a sales process in itself is one thing, but it's tying all of the strategy, I guess, into the process. So it's finding, like building your pipeline and then profiling the decision makers or the contact, and then the value proposition messaging. Like it can be overwhelming when you're trying to think of all the aspects, because every customer is so different. Even if they're in the same industry, their organization operates differently. So if, you know, finding that middle ground where if we can walk away with a process that is generic but easily tailored to target specific characteristics, I guess that would be fantastic for me because I have a diverse client base.
Okay, great. Vanessa, you had your hand up, and then Stephanie.
So first of all, Catherine, preach. Everything that you just said is so true and something that we deal with constantly. My question, or I guess what I would love to get out of this, is kind of similar, but just some kind of framework for how often we should check in on our process, because we're in a very high growth stage right now and we're learning so much about our clients and customers all the time. So like how we're very adaptable, and I'm thankful that we're so agile, but how agile should we be in terms of testing different things, like how long and how flexible?
Okay, great. And then Stephanie. Oh, you're muted, Stephanie.
Thank you. With the last session where we talked about A, B, and C clients, and where the C client has a little bit more of an automated or self-serve option, my question would be, how different does the process then need to be between different categories like that? So an A client versus B client versus C client. And that might tie in some of the concepts that Catherine and Vanessa brought up as well, because you're constantly looking at it and assessing it and trying to figure out, how do I systematize it so I don't have to do duplication of work. But you might spend less time even in the discovery call process with a C client than you would with an A. So be helpful to kind of understand what that looks like.
Okay, great. Anybody want to add anything?
I can chip in a little bit. So we're a SaaS-based company. And sometimes a little bit of some of the processes that are discussed are a little bit more focused toward product. So I'm going to be asking some pointed questions that are probably very specific to my model. Looking for process that works for engaging people online and offline. Like what changes, what is the happy or not so happy flow?
Right. Okay. And then I think, Lori, did you want to add something? Yeah. Okay, great.
For my business, I'm hoping I get the tools today to build a sales process for different segments of customers. So we have two B2B segments, that's retail and food service, and then B2C, which is done online through our e-commerce channels. So I realized, while doing this activity that we don't have a clearly defined sales process. It's been very sporadic. So I'm hoping that after this session, I'm able to jot down clearly what each of the three pillars should look like.
Great. Okay. Anybody else want to throw something else into the mix? We're going to try and answer as many of the questions as we can. And I will say that if there's stuff that I can't cover today, because we really only have an hour, I will dig up some resources and send them out afterwards. Okay. Debbie.
So we have a consumer product and service, and I'm hearing more and more that I really need to deeply understand the funnel, the sales funnel for the e-commerce side of things. And I just get lost in the analytics, like I understand dealing with human beings, but when they're coming through a digital world through multiple different touch points, I have a lot to learn in this area.
Yeah. Yep. Kelsey?
I was just I'll actually just piggyback off of what Debbie just said, because because the thing that I would love to take away is not necessarily with e-com, but our whole sales process has largely gone online in comparison to having those face-to-face conversations. And so the part that's been challenging is now when you can't be right in front of a buyer, how do you what's your plan B? How do you pivot if all of a sudden you're ghosted or you don't actually get feedback?
Yeah. Yeah, it doesn't help that everything that you thought you knew about sales, the sales process, has kind of been turned on its head. It was happening before COVID. COVID accelerated the heck out of it, for sure. And so that it's put people in a lot of interesting positions trying to figure out how to change things and what they need to do differently. So I'm going to be throwing you guys into a breakout room, just so you know, in case you hadn't figured it out yet. My best way of helping people learn something is to actually get them to talk to each other and ask each other questions and kind of work it through. Now, it doesn't mean I'm not going to give you information. It just means that I'm also going to ask you to think, and I'm going to ask you to come up with some stuff on your own. So we're going to go into a breakout session. If there's any last additional comments that you want to add to this, what you would like to get out of this session, do so now. Otherwise, I'm going to be getting you guys into a breakout session shortly. I'm going to share the slide that has the questions, and I'm going to ask Carly to help me get the breakout session set up. So where's my share screen again? I'm so much more comfortable when I'm actually talking to people. Here we go. Are you seeing the questions for the breakout session? Great. So we're going to, first off, make sure that somebody actually jots down your brilliance as you come up with it, because that's really important, because then we're going to share everything that everybody comes up with. But the first thing that I want you to think about is 3 business benefits that you feel would come out of having a defined sales process. Identify in your understanding what you consider to be 3 core steps in any sales process. And then the last one is think about your own business and what's unique to your business and what steps in a sales process you think might be unique to your business. So it's 3 questions. Carly's going to help by kind of feeding them through the little notes that come in. It's small text, so pay attention because it'll be there. And I'd like you to, in your groups, talk through these things and see what you come up with in your group, and then we'll come back and share, and we'll just see what our collective brilliance comes up with, okay? Everybody's back? All right, well, once again, I'm actually, I love a nice slide, but I'm gonna stop sharing my slides so I can see you all. All right, great, so I would love to hear what you all came up with. Who would like to start and share the business benefits that they identified? Okay, I saw Vanessa's little hand icon go up first, so why don't you jump in first, Vanessa?
Hello. So 3 business benefits that we identified were, first of all, we did more than 3, but we said increased sales, the ability to focus on where to allocate resources, the ease for onboarding potential salespeople, also for attracting quality salespeople because the sales process becomes so refined and well-defined, developing a repeatable process, and then we said predictability in revenue.
Wow, okay, you hit a lot of them.
Sorry, yeah.
Who would like to go next? All right, Stephanie.
So R3 was consistency,
Right.
ease of repetition, and ability to measure success.
Okay, great. All right, who would like to go next? How many groups did we have?
I'll go next for our group.
Okay, great. Thanks, Kelsey.
Yeah, you're welcome. We said efficiency in both the process and in qualifying buyers. Understanding, so defining roles and making sure that we're meeting the needs of the customer, having targets, and then creating a baseline that allows us to stay focused and be methodical in our processes.
Excellent. Who else did we have? I know we had, okay, Marta, and then, okay.
Lori and I were in the same group and we did not get to that part. We talked about the process more than we did the benefits.
Okay, so you heard the things that other people said though, and
Yes,
and you just
I
didn't
wrote them
cover-
down.
Okay, awesome. Okay, so that was 4 groups. How many groups did we have? Do we have another group that should chime in here?
There may have been one other one. I'm sorry, Carly just stepped away, but I think there might have been 5. But
Okay,
Yeah.
so anybody whose group has not yet shared what they came up with for the benefits? I don't see any hands or anybody jumping up and down saying, pick me, pick me. So why don't we move along to the next one, the steps that were identified. So who would like to start with the steps that were identified? Who should I pick on? Lori, why don't you? So since you guys didn't do the benefits, why don't you share what steps were identified?
Yeah, to us, it's really defining the brand strategy, because not everyone is going to be our customer, and being okay with that. Defining a target list, reaching out through different channels. So whether it's LinkedIn or Instagram, Facebook, also call, email, in person, really depending on who you're talking to or figuring out the best way to reach them. Following up and getting feedback is really important. Why did they not convert, or why did they convert? Really understanding the reason behind it, whether it's pricing related, whether it's not the right time, whatever it is, and then closing and always ensuring that there's communication between us and our customers.
Okay. So what I heard there was some research, some approaches, and then you mentioned closing and follow up.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So who else would like to share the steps that they identified?
I can
Steph. Okay, we've got Vanessa and Stephanie again. This time Stephanie's hand went up quicker. So Stephanie.
Just as the scribe, I thought I would take this on. So identifying the prospect or researching, the picture exploratory call, and follow up and getting feedback.
Okay. Any to add? Vanessa, do you want to add to that?
One that really stood out for all of us was qualifying and understanding what tools you need to complete that sale.
Okay, when you think about tools, what are you thinking about?
So a CRM was brought up, but also if there's depending on your business, you might be doing a demo of some kind. So understanding the different things that you need to be fully prepared for, whether it's a discovery call or a live demo.
Okay, great. Any other groups have things to add to the steps that were identified in a typical, any sales process? What other steps were identified, if any?
This might have already been said, but one thing we noted was doing like a needs assessment for whoever it is that you're talking to.
Right. Okay. Anybody have anything to add to that before I ask you if there were any unique ones? Lori, did you put your hand up again or did you just move? No? Okay. Anybody have something to add?
Just a quick question. Is renewal part of the sales process or is that too far along?
Well, I think that kind of depends on how you choose to define your sales process. If you have a subscription model, for example, I would imagine renewal would be pretty critical.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I'll throw that in there, renewal.
Okay. All right. So what about unique? And again, Stephanie, that might actually fall into a category of a unique step in a sales process if you have a subscription model and renewal is critical. But what other unique things were identified, things that might be different and not part of a generic sales process? Anybody come up with anything? Has anybody, oh, Stephanie, jump in.
Yeah, sorry. We had a couple. I mean, one is with Alexa's business. She does a different and unique customer service follow-up in her process. And Abby's is a SaaS interior design company. So customized, personalized service is in that pitch. And then for my company, we help businesses access government grants. So we rely on the government programs that are constantly changing. And so it's almost like a repeat sales, sub-sales process in every sale that we do.
Okay. When you talk about a repeat sub-sales, for example, you know a company, you know kind of what they're looking for, a government opportunity comes up, so that triggers the outreach to the companies that are relevant, that kind of a piece?
Yeah, it's that. And then also when a program ends, that we have the ability to pick up on another government program that could maybe provide comparable benefits. So you're constantly recycling. So because we don't have control over our service and the products or the services that we have, they're dictated and controlled by the government. So that's the biggest challenge, I think, for us, is you have to be very agile. And then, you know, somebody goes on TV and says, there's this grant, and then all of a sudden all the spots are filled. So also to manage expectations in that way can be challenging as well.
Okay. Is there anybody that does purely an online sales process and no other method? No, I don't see any hands waving. So a unique characteristic in that type of a sales model. Well, Vanessa, you put your hand up. So is yours all online?
Well, our sales process for the most part now is all online, but I did like something that is unique about our business is that what we offer, we curate high volume custom corporate gifts. So our product changes from proposal to proposal. So everything that we create is dependent on the customer's budget, what they're looking for, any themes that are like pertinent to them. So our product kind of changes with every order. It could be a $50 item, or it could be a $500 item. So how we position those things change quite often as well.
So yours would be a highly customized proposal element to your sales process for sure.
Which is why qualification is very top of mind for us, because we don't want to be spending time creating proposals for the wrong people or for companies that don't align with us.
Absolutely. Okay, Pooja?
So an important part of our sales process, because we sell sensors for wheelchairs, so we're in the sort of health tech space and sort of in the medical devices space as well. A big component of what we do is education, and so we actually have a whole education pathway. And because there's so many stakeholders in terms of who we could be talking to, depending on who they are, they typically might go through a completely different education process. So we have a step that's called the education pathway, which could be like webinars, or it could be like demos. It could be a bunch of different things depending on who they are. And then another interesting, or I guess unique step, is because our devices are often funded by the government, like Medicaid programs. We also have a step where we typically provide some support with getting our devices funded. And because it is a new and innovative product, there's again some education sometimes that's necessary. So even though we're not the ones that are actually applying for funding support, as a manufacturer, we sometimes have to work with our dealer partners to fill in the gaps and provide the knowledge that they need to get our devices funded.
Okay, so there's a couple of elements to that. There's the end user education piece, but then there's also the potential channel partner education piece. So both of those processes, so your channel strategy would feed into your sales process, and your sales process has to take those things into account and make sure that that's being allowed for. So yeah, there are definitely some unique steps as well as the generic sales process steps. There are always going to be some things that are specific and unique. So I saw that George posted a question. Does anybody run proof of concept? Yeah, so I've lost the whole question now because there are too many responses in the chat. But I see that, who answered it? Catherine, you answered his question. So do you want to just kind of jump in on that one a little bit as to how you run proof of concept as part of your sales process?
Yeah, actually, my comment to George was he asked, does anybody use proof of concept as part of your sales process?
Mm-hmm.
And I was replying and said, we do, but oddly enough, I never actually considered it as part of the sales process. It's just something we do, but it wasn't like, that wasn't top of mind. Ours is a large commitment, so it becomes part of limiting the risk for the client and the time and the money that they're investing in for us to prove out that we can actually deliver, because our platform is highly configurable. So there is that early stage to prove that we can deliver to that client. Even though we have experience with like industries, everybody sees themselves as different.
Yeah,
so
for sure.
I think actually thinking of it as part of our sales process, as silly as it seems, will actually change the way we think about it and get it more refined in our process, and not just be a novel thing. Oh, let's try proof of concept.
No, absolutely. I think that makes a lot of sense. The other element was the trial. So does anybody else use a free trial or a trial period as part of their sales process? Vanessa, do you still have your hand up, or was that from the previous question or the previous answer? Okay, thank you. Okay, so Kat wants to run a trial with existing customers before offering it to the public. So that's like it's almost like a beta test, except with a different type of product. So allowing people who already know you and trust you and who you have goodwill with to test it out first. So that's more part of the pre-sales process, except that if they then decide to buy, it became part of the sales process, right? So very interesting. Awesome. So definitely some clear benefits, definitely some steps in the sales process that everybody feels are pretty consistent, and then definitely some unique steps in the sales process. And all of that is absolutely and unequivocally correct and important information, right? So let's kind of move on a little bit. I'm going to be sharing back with you probably a lot of the stuff that you've already shared with me, but perhaps with a little bit more background and supporting information. So I am going to go to share screen again and make sure I pick the right screen. There we go. So sales process is a set of repeatable steps that your sales team takes to convert a prospect into a customer. What that set of repeatable steps are will depend to a certain degree on your business model. Some things are going to happen regardless, and some things are going to be unique. What you call them might be different, like calling something a proof of concept versus a demo versus a trial. These are all slightly different elements, but they're kind of representing the same thing. Get on the bicycle and try it out, right? So that's essentially, you're doing the same thing. You're just calling it something slightly different. What the sales process is not is your pipeline. So we talked about sales strategy, which is kind of the back end. This is the first, who you're going to go after and how you're going to target, how you're going to refine your targets, etc., how you're going to position yourself. The sales process is then, how are you actually going to reach and connect with and convert those people into customers? And then the sales pipeline is the next step. That's how do you then track what has come out of your sales process? And managing that pipeline is another really significant part of the overall activity. But the pipeline itself is not the process. So one of the interesting things about sales is that a lot of people they think it just kind of either comes naturally, or because you're passionate about your business, it's going to be a given. I shared the story of that first company of mine that failed for lack of a sales process. At the end of that, when I was doing my post-mortem on that company, I had to decide what to do about it. What I decided to do was never to let that happen again, ever. And so I went into full commission sales, where I spent 10 years of my life doing this. The fortunate thing for me is that the company I went to had a very clearly defined sales process. And that's how they taught us. They taught us someone commented about quicker onboarding of new salespeople. That was part of the process. You came in, you got trained, everybody got trained the same way. Everybody followed the same sales process. And as long as you consistently followed that process, you'd get sales. Now, some people did better than other people, but the bottom line is, if you consistently followed that process, it would result in sales because it had been tested and tried and refined and improved over time, and they knew they could get consistent results from it. So that's really kind of the next thing to talk about, is just basically, so I think you've got a pretty good idea of why you need a sales process, but let's talk a little bit first about what a good sales process contains. So first off, it's clear, it's customer centric. So the process is based on how the customer buys, identifying how a typical persona, you've identified your personas and your ideal customers. How would that person most likely buy? What is their process? Your sales process needs to reflect that. Clear and actionable. So each element of the sales process has to be really well understood by everybody. So by all of your own salespeople, by the people who manage your salespeople, if you have that good fortune to have an actual team, by the people internally who process the sales, etc. Everybody has to understand what that process is and the language associated with it. It has to be replicable so that any sales rep coming in can do it. It can't be based on the awesome charisma of an individual. One of the biggest hurdles startup companies have is that initial sales are often based on the awesome charisma of the founder, the passion of the founder, the commitment of the founder. And then when they start to bring on new salespeople, it's just like, well, just watch me and do what I do. But it's not clearly defined enough. And generally speaking, an outside salesperson, someone who comes into your organization, can't do what a founder does because they haven't lived it and birthed that company and been that intimate with it for so long. So having a clearly defined sales process that anyone who comes in that has the attributes that they need to be in sales can utilize it and can follow it and can deliver on it. Predictable. So there has to be a good, clear sense of, if we do this, then this happens. And then if we do this, this happens. So that predictability, understanding what an expected outcome is from each step in the sales process allows you to understand when it's not working. If you don't know what you're going to get out of a particular step, then you don't know when it's not working. And then, of course, goal-oriented, measurable, so setting targets and goals. Every step of the sales process should have some goals and some metrics and KPIs associated with it. So not just the final outcome, how many sales come out of the bottom, because if you don't have a sense of how each step in the process should work, you don't know if it's working as it should. And you lose the opportunity for improving the overall impact by tweaking the steps along the way and improving the steps along the way. So you guys hit on many, if not all, of the why you need a sales process, the benefits to the business. You did actually get a lot of them. I'm going to go through them again. And again, you guys, you will get this presentation and you will have the slides, but I will also send the PDF version of the slides with the notes attached. So you'll have that as some additional resource as well. So basically, Defined sales process, it creates a clear path for sales reps to follow. Faster onboarding of new staff, you've already identified that. A track for continuous improvement, that goes back to knowing what the expected outcomes are for each step. And that way you know where to zero in. You know, if a particular step is not working, that's where you need to focus some effort. Predictability of sales and revenue is huge. Like, it's huge. If you have a hammer lock on your sales process and you know what comes out of each step and what you can expect out of each step, and you make that repeatable, consistently repeatable, then you have the ability to predict sales and revenue. Completely separate from the actual benefits of the sales process itself is the potential impact on if you're raising money. If you can show that you have a defined sales process with predictable outcomes that can accurately project your sales and revenue going forward, getting money, whether it's from a bank, an investor, wherever, is much easier. So that's a side benefit of having that predictable sales and revenue. Qualification. Vanessa, you hammered on qualification a couple of times. The better your sales process, the better you're going to be at knowing whether or not a lead is qualified and worth your time and effort. That's a huge part of any successful sales process, is understanding how to qualify, how to identify qualified leads, what it is you need to do in that qualification step to ensure that you're not investing a lot of time and energy on leads that are not useful. Has anybody ever seen Glenn Ross? It's one of the best known sales movies. It's a terrible sales model. It's a very old school sales model, but the whole movie is about fighting for the good leads, right? And the good leads mean qualified leads, people who will benefit from your product or service, people who want to buy, and people who can buy. That it's critical. And Vanessa, I would agree with you that it's one of the key steps in the sales process is qualifying, making sure that you're not spinning your wheels with a prospect that either has no intention or ability to buy. Improved communication between company teams. Has anybody ever worked in sales in an engineering or accounting company? I can't see everybody, so I don't know if anyone's responding.
I worked in marketing at an engineering company.
Okay. So there's engineering language, then there's sales language and marketing language, and oftentimes these languages do not translate well. If you have a very, very clear, defined sales process that then gets communicated throughout the different elements of your team, everybody's speaking the same language when it comes to sales. And so it can facilitate better communication across the company. Greater insight into sales team performance. If you're working with a crackerjack salesperson who, you know, you're in general is doing really well in closing sales, you may not know that at one or another stage of the process, they're actually underperforming. If you know what the different steps in your sales process are, and you know what the KPIs are for each of those steps, then you have the ability to target support efforts where they are most needed. You have the ability to allow your sales managers to focus on coaching for improvement, as opposed to spending too much time onboarding new people, for example, or looking at assuming that the great salesperson is already good enough and couldn't actually be one step better. So it's just having that granularity in terms of understanding each step of the process and what the outcomes are for each step of the process. You have a better opportunity to coach those salespeople. And then, of course, a better overall customer experience, because sometimes what happens if there's no defined sales process is that steps are skipped. So qualifying isn't as in-depth as it should be. Needs analysis is not as in-depth as it should be. You get to a point where you think you're ready to close a sale and find out that something really important got missed because there's not a specific process. There's also the possibility of rushing a customer through the process. The sales process has to reflect the customer needs and the way the customer buys. And if it's not clearly set out, it may end up putting a potential customer in a place where they feel like they've been kind of railroaded, and that's not going to be helpful. So those are basically the benefits of a sales process. They're a lot more than just having some revenue predictability. I know in the interest of time, we're going to have to wrap up soon, but I just wanted to kind of go back in terms of a full step-by-step sales process. Marta, what I would say is that you've got a lot more potential steps in your process that you can think about. If you go and look, what are the essential steps in a sales process, and you search it, you actually come up with about 20 different versions of that. However, there are certain key things that show up again and again and again. And research and research and approach and qualifying and needs analysis, and then some kind of presentation, proposal, opportunity, sales offering, and then close. And then in some, follow-up is considered part, in some it is not. But what's more important than anything is to sit down and think about how your customer buys and define the sales process that best reflects how your customer buys. In terms of online sales process, so if someone's selling purely online or predominantly online, there's a whole other realm of data analysis and marketing qualified leads versus sales qualified leads. But the most important thing, if your sales process is primarily not what you call close touch, so it's kind of removed because it's happening predominantly online, then understanding the analytics is really critical. So understanding how many times they see an ad before they click, how many times they visit your website before they buy. That kind of stuff is really critical if you're doing online. And there's a whole wealth of information available around that. But again, defining your sales process has to be, okay, what's the first thing? Is the first thing a visit to the website? Then how do you determine where you want to pull them through that website to get them to the point of actually purchasing something, and defining what those steps are? Nurture campaigns, we didn't talk about nurture campaigns, but if you're doing a lot of online sales and you get somebody who shows a bit of interest, then a step in your sales process would most likely be a nurture campaign. So that's how somebody expresses enough of an interest that you get some contact information, and then you can reach out on a more regular basis. So it becomes more of a marketing process initially until they get to a point of showing a specific interest. Catherine, you asked about tying the strategy to the sales process. Everything has to tie together. So I got to tell you as well that sales is not a simple and a uncomplicated process. So all of that stuff that George shared about strategy, mapping all of that stuff first, and then identifying for each of those channels that you've identified or each of those target markets, how is that customer going to buy? What is the sales process for that customer? If it's a distribution channel strategy, what's the sales process for convincing a distributor to take on your product? What's the sales process for not only convincing them to take on your product, but convincing them to actively sell it? Because sometimes a distributor takes on your product and then never sells anything. So there's each one of those realities has a specific sales process that will reflect how the customer buys, or in the case of a distributor, buys into what you're trying to accomplish. So how to do it is literally just to do it and think through how the customer buys. And as you're doing it, don't be afraid. Catherine, you mentioned the fact you never thought about proof of concept as being part of your sales process. Awesome. Now you can go back and look at your sales process and say, right, I've got this new piece of information. How does it fit? Should I be making this a regular part, or should I only be doing it when somebody's hesitating, right? And you can build that into the sales process. And again, Stephanie, you were asking about if you define ABC clients, how do you differentiate the sales process? Again, it's about looking at those individual clients and saying, okay, how does this client buy? Automating the C's, you want to automate as much as possible just because you want to put as much of your energy and attention into your top ones as you possibly can. So once again, how do those customers buy? How did they buy the first time? How do you get them to buy again? What was the process that worked last time? How can we automate that process? And it all has to come down to how does the customer buy? I'm going through the different questions that you identified. And again, it's all about customizing that sales process to your customer and how your customer buys. I've got a slide up now of a bunch of resources that you can tap into. I know the Ansoff matrix came from Harvard Business Review. Harvard Business Review has masses of really useful information around sales and sales process. A lot of companies, Salesforce.com has got a lot of good information there. A CRM, you talked about tools. A lot of the CRMs out there, Salesforce, HubSpot, etc., also have really, really useful blogs and articles on different things. Now, obviously, they're going to try and use those as a way to sell you their CRM too, but that's okay. You can learn from their sales process as well. And so access those tools. Uvaro is a sales training company, and full disclosure, it happens to be owned by two of my children, but it's an extraordinary resource for understanding sales process. They have a whole bunch of educational elements on their website that you can access free of charge. Best sales books, highly rated sales books. Another place, if you're looking at incorporating video sales or video into your sales, Vidyard is a company that has excellent resources on how to incorporate video into your sales process. There is so much out there. I hope between George and myself today, you've learned something that will help you increase the sales of your business. I will send out the slides with notes so you have a little bit of additional information. And are there any final questions? Because I think we're pretty much at time. We're 1 minute over, but do we have time for a couple of questions if there are any? What do we have in the chat?
In interest of time, I just added a question in the chat. So just with regards to the way that Salesforce.com does their sales process, which is actually to identify a no versus, and I think they have several stages of identifying no, and it's almost like, they're filtering through it. Can you just comment a little bit on like the effectiveness of that? Is it better for, for service-based businesses versus product-based?
So I would imagine that the reason they've done that is that they don't want their salespeople to spend a lot of time working, potentially trying to convince somebody who has no intention of buying. So there's a negotiation book called Getting to Yes. And what Salesforce is doing is utilizing the opposite, which is getting to know. It can be very helpful, especially if you've got a lot of leads coming in. Like if you're doing a lot of demand generation and you have lots and lots of leads coming in, then the quicker you can filter out the ones who are definite no's, they're never going to buy, they're never going to be able to buy. I find it really interesting because in a lot of software sales, when they put the pricing, how they put the pricing matrix on their website, in a lot of cases, that's what they're doing. they're putting the pricing right up front and center. And they're not even trying to do the value-based selling. They're just saying, this is what it costs. If you're in, let's talk. That's also where the freemium model comes in, because they for people for whom cost is a serious issue, they come in on a freemium model. They find value in it, and then they're willing to pay something to get more value. But at the same time, eliminating people who are never going to buy is not a bad thing. I wouldn't do it unless I had a strong demand generation. And
yeah, I'd love if there's a resource that I could read up on that, because I've been doing so much search on, and it is what you're saying, how to get to a yes. And in our business, it's we just have an abundance of leads coming in wanting government grant funding. So it'd be great if there's a resource I could look at. Thank you.
Great. Okay. Any other questions, comments? I don't see faces anymore, so I don't know if anybody's still here. We've got a lot of names on the screen, but I hope this has been helpful. And if there are any other questions that come up after the fact, feel free to email them to Linda and or Carly, and I'm sure they'll pass them along.
Yeah, so. Excellent. Well, thank you so much, Anne. Thank you very much. I wanted to mention when you talked about Vidyard. So for those of you who received our invitation and there was a video in the email, that's what we used. It was Vidyard. So just to give you an idea of how that works. But that was excellent information, and I really appreciate you leading us through all those points and discussion. So we are going to move on to the next portion of our day today. We're going to talk about program supports and resources for women-led businesses with Patricia Muir. So I'd like to introduce her. Patricia is a Rhyze Up leadership coach. Some of you may have worked with her in the room, and a mentor here at Innovation Guelph. Patricia is going to share information about supplier diversity certification for women business enterprises. Now, Patricia has over 3 decades of working with Fortune 500 consulting companies and is known for her ability to interpret standards in the best interest of the business, manage complex projects, and keep everybody lined up for success. Her sense of clarity and structure continues to contribute to finding practical solutions while developing a strong business case and strong relationships that have a positive effect at all levels of an organization. So, Patricia, take the floor.
Thank you, Linda. And hello, everyone. I know I do see some faces that I recognize. I'm going to start off with all of you on screen. First of all, this is going to be information packed. Okay, so I'd like to get an idea of how many of you are familiar with what supplier diversity certification is. And if you could just raise your hand, your thumb, whatever, and I'll just go through. Okay. Okay, not as many as I thought might. So it is going to be a lot of information, but you know what? It ties in with what George and Anne have been talking about. In fact, as I listened to George's presentation, I thought, okay, this is part of a sales strategy that takes you through your channels. Okay, this could be a channel. So I'm going to share my screen. And go into presentation mode. There you go. So if I could have a thumbs up that you can see the presentation and there's no notes, nothing like that on there. Okay. I'm going to ask Carly to let me know when there are questions. Interestingly enough, I can't see faces. So if you do have any questions, put them in the chat box and I will answer them as we go through. Also, at the end, I'll provide some time for us to be on screen with one another and you can ask some questions that might be specific to your needs. So what we're going to do today is I'm going to tell you about what supplier diversity is. And what is supplier diversity? It actually is a benefit to your business for some businesses. So I want to tell you what the benefits are and also help you to go through a decision-making process whether it's a go or no go for you. It's not for every business. And then I will end with some tips on how to make certification work for you if you do go ahead. Okay. So what is supplier diversity? It's a corporate program where corporations source suppliers identified as underrepresented groups in the supply chain. Now, believe it or not, women-owned businesses are still considered to be underrepresented, although the statistics show that there's an awful lot of us out there. It involves tracking the spend. Now, a lot of these corporations are mandated, meaning that they have to track their spend as part of their key performance in procurement. More so in the United States than in Canada. Canada does it because we still take this type of program as being, it's a good practice. It's good for everyone. It's good for business. It includes outreach, networking, matchmaking, and I'll say a little more about matchmaking because that's the big benefit here, some training and mentorship for suppliers such as yourself. So in a supplier diversity program, there's what we call supplier diversity councils. Now, the pre-work that was sent out to you was just for you to do some research on those different, excuse me, something has changed here, obviously. There we go. So that the supplier diversity councils include some that are just for women-owned businesses and some that are for other underrepresented groups. So We Connect International and We Be Canada is strictly for women-owned businesses. CGLCC and NGLCC in the United States is for the gay lesbian community, and IWSCC is for those business owners who have disabilities and are running businesses that require inclusion. And CAMC, you may have heard of, is the Canadian Aboriginal and Other Minorities Council. So that's what a diversity council is. And we'll talk a little more about that on the next slide. This slide, the application is, and the candidate, that would be your business. So it would be the business owner who makes a formal application for supplier diversity certification. And there is a process, which I will speak to. It's on behalf of qualified businesses. So here are the councils in Canada. I'll go from left to right. We Connect is for women-owned businesses. And if you're certified with We Connect, then that also helps you to reach out into the United States. So I would, for those of you who are interested in moving into the United States, consider We Connect International. We Be Canada is the Canadian part of, well, not the part, but equivalent of We Connect. And they focus in Canada, although they do have letters of understanding with the United States, where businesses in the United States do recognize We Be Canada. So I'll give you some information here that you could have both those certifications if you wanted to invest in both. And then when we go to CGLCC, those are for LGBT businesses. And the purpose there is for them to lead the economic and social revolution as well. So they have a social part of their membership. And then CAMC is for Canadian Aboriginals and other minorities. So you could be a woman and you could be gay, and you could also be in CAMC. And if you wanted to really double down, triple down on your ability to get more points with supplier diversity, you could be part of all of these councils if you qualify. And there has been, a definite qualifications for each one of them that you may qualify for and others that you don't. So I see that Katrina, you've just been We Be certified. Congratulations. It's a bit of a process. Yes, I'll talk about that to get accepted, but not too crazy. So yes, it's an in-depth process, because the whole idea is for us to do our due diligence to ensure that the businesses are owned by women or whatever underrepresented group they're talking about. For the purpose of today, I will focus more on women-owned businesses, okay? But if you would qualify for any of the others, please read their website so that you know exactly what you need to be qualified. Because there's some basics, like governance documents, that are the same for all councils. And then there's just little different ones for each council. So if you refer to the pre-work, the list of supplier diversity councils, I'll go on to the next page. On that list, there are links for you to do the research so you can learn more about what the requirements are. They have their applications online as well on their portals. And one of the benefits of being certified is that you get to be able to build relationships with some of the corporations that are really important for your business. So you can see some of the examples here, the banks, financial industry, they understand supplier diversity very well, and they're very much bought into the whole process. E&Y is doing a marvelous job with their supplier diversity. They were one of the first ones to really take it to heart. Rather than it just be checking the boxes for them, they do so much to help their diverse suppliers, along with the City of Toronto as well. And not to say the others don't, but these are just some of the highlighted ones that I've brought up so that you can see who you could get introductions to at the procurement level and the buyer level if you were certified. Now, you can still get those introductions, but being certified as a woman-owned business gives you an advantage. Are there any questions so far before we put up a poll? Okay, I'm going to ask Carly to put up a poll so that we can see what industries are you attracted to for your sales strategy?
All right, launching that poll, Patricia.
So you can choose as many as you would like. See, lots of food coming up. Federal government, healthcare, financial, and some automotive. Okay. Anyone else want to respond before we close the poll? So see that there is a high amount of those of you who are interested in financial, the financial industry and healthcare coming in second, and even federal government. So this is something that you would want to at least consider. There is an investment. There's an investment of money on an annual basis, and there's also an investment of time. And I'm going to speak to the investment of time because that's important for women-owned businesses, for entrepreneurs that I have found. So I'll close that poll. I'll close the poll. There we go. All right. So the benefits, one of the benefits is that it gives you an extended power networking. So you're not just networking with all sorts of businesses, you are networking with growth-minded businesses, leaders in underrepresented business owners. They could be representatives such as procurement and buyers in the large multinational corporations, representatives from regional partner organizations and the government. Regional and international conferences are a big benefit when we start going back to conferences face-to-face, but all the councils have done a really good job over the last 2 years of making their conferences work really well virtually. And actually, for a lot of people, it's a lot easier because it allows them from all over the country to come to these virtual events. The other benefit is the marketing edge by leveraging your supplier diversity opportunities. So one of them, it could be that you have supplier procurement goals. You may have goals yourself to work with other underrepresented companies. So it could be part of your social responsibility goals where you want to spread the business to those other underrepresented businesses. There's a listing on search engines. Some of you are probably familiar with Ariba, and that's where you would register, where there is a big search base for corporations to find suppliers. So you would have a listing on that particular listing, that portal, and also identified by your industry grouping, whatever it is. So it makes it easier for corporations to find you and for other businesses as well, because other businesses such as yours would have access to that listing so that you'd be able to see who you could do business with. One of the other big benefits is your ability to build your capacity and your capability to go after some of the big contracts that you may not be able to do on your own. So one supplier, diverse supplier, may have a certain part of a product or a service, and you may have the other, or you may not be able to have all the resources fit for that particular goal, so, or this particular project. So you would be able to go together, and with say it's two of you, if you're both certified, then it's more attractive to the corporation. So that's one of the big benefits of marketing as well. So it can significantly accelerate the growth of your business nationally, North America, and globally, if that is your intent. And you can gain new markets and supportive networks. And that's the capacity building of the supporting networks. There's also a part of business development, education and training. All these councils have great training. They bring in pilot programs to help people find funding. I went to one a couple of years ago that was with Moody's. That was a 3-day training that I would have put at least a $3,000 ticket on. And because it was a pilot with them and they were doing it worldwide, they invited those who were certified to come to this particular program. And there was so much to learn about funding at a very high level, if that's where your business is scaling towards that level. And there's also sponsored training by other providers or partners, such as the international trade and for financing. So who's who in an assessment? Okay, so my background over the last 10 years, I've probably assessed hundreds of businesses in these different councils, mostly the women councils. And I've also been on the other side too. My business has been certified. So as an assessor, that would be someone, a staff member or an independent contractor such as myself, who is part of that council that assesses an applicant's business for compliance with whatever requirements they have, that council has, for diversity. And the assessor is trained and qualified to perform due diligence to support the recommendations. So the assessor recommends. Just a note here, the assessor does not provide any consulting to meet the requirements. So it's totally up to the business owner to be totally prepared when they make their application and upload any governance documents. The council certification board, I see there is a question. Is there an advantage to being woman-owned business underrepresented in other ways? Yes, there is. Yes. In the assessment process, each council has their own assessment process. So the assessment process is similar, but I can tell you there is a difference for some of them depending on what the qualifications are. So for example, you've brought up about being Indigenous or a person of disability, then you could apply for those particular councils, but it would not be a benefit to the main woman-owned council. Okay, so we could have more conversation about that if you needed to have some more detail on it. So the council certification board manager, so it could be a board or a certification approval manager. Each council does it differently. So they either have a board that takes a look at the assessment report done by the assessor, and they will look at the recommendations. Sometimes the recommendations from the assessor is that additional information is required, or the assessor may not be able to comfortably recommend, in which case it's escalated then to the approval process, and the approval manager or the board will take a look at it to see if all the requirements are met, or if there's something missing, then they will then reach out to the business owner and ask for more information. The certified supplier, that would be the business that has completed the assessment process. They meet all requirements, and they're recommended and subsequently approved for certification. Certification is on an annual basis. Some councils have a renewal of every year where it's not a total assessment, but maybe additional information, a questionnaire, like has anything changed, okay? So an important note here is, although I may flip back and forth between women-owned and other types of diversity, it's the business that is certified, not the owner. So the owner may be a woman, but she is not certified, it's her business that is certified. That might bring up some questions. So key criteria for certification. One of the things that I'm providing is the list of documents. If you have not received it, it will be sent out. It's a list of documents for each type of organization, each type of ownership. So we can have solopreneurs, we can have corporations, partners, and other types of ownership agreements. But at least 51% of the shares has to be held by women. So I'm talking about the women certification councils at the moment. It's 51%. Now for the other councils, it's usually 51% as well. So I have come across many businesses where it's 50-50. So in a woman-owned business, because it might be her spouse who's male may own 50%, she may own 50%. I've seen one where she owned 50.9% and he owned the rest. The 50.9 does not qualify. It has to be 51%. It must be real, substantial, and reflected in the governance documents. So those are your articles of incorporation or anything else that you can provide that show, such as share registers or directors' resolutions that show that it is owned by the woman. Securities, shares, capital stock directly owned by women. Also requires that the business is managed by the woman. So that means a majority, she will be part of the directors, majority directors. She may have the opportunity to have a casting vote if there's 2 directors and 1 director is a male. Majority voting rights for women, and the risks and the profits have to be proportioned with the ownership interest. Now, there are some situations, especially in startup, where women won't take salary for a couple of years until their business is built. That's okay, that's taken into consideration, but there are other ways that the assessor will take a look to make sure that she does have management over that business. And control is the other thing. So management and control are 2 different things. She may manage the business, but she may not have final decision-making the final decision-making authority on the bank accounts. She needs to have involvement in daily operations. So even though we encourage business owners to eventually let go of the vine, they still need to show that they have control over that business. And also the legal and operation authority. I'm just checking to see if there's any questions. No? Okay. So in the bottom left-hand corner, you'll see, depending on each council, a person who identifies as LGBT, so they would have to have at least 51% shares. A person who identifies as Aboriginal or other minority, they would have to have at least 51% shares, management, control, and the same with the council that is for veteran and for disabilities. So here's the process, and it's not as difficult as you might think, but there are steps to it. So the first thing that you would do if you were interested, you would go onto their portal, on the council's portal. You would pay an application fee, which is not refundable, so you have to be very sure that you are ready for this. And you would fill out their application and you would gather the documents. That's the second part. You'd gather all the documents that they ask for. You would submit them in however way they want it submitted. So most of them have a portal that you upload to. And then step 3 is you may have an interview with an assessor. You may not. Now I can tell you, CAMC does not have an interview. They just take a look at the documents, And if everything is okay with the documents, then they go to the step of recommending or approving. But with the other councils, we go through 1, 2, 3. So you have an interview. The interview is usually about 60 minutes to 90 minutes. It's a positive. It's not like an audit. It's like a friendly assessment to learn more about your business. And then step 4, the assessor submits all the documents, and if it's reviewed by the board or the manager and it's approved, then you are notified that you are then approved. So the timeline for these councils, because they're dealing with a lot of applicants, and I can tell you over the last couple of years, there's a lot more movement in supplier diversity as corporations learn how they can take advantage of this great array of talent that is out there in business owners. And also more women are seeing the advantage of being able to have a one-on-one meeting with a buyer. That's one of the big advantages that I did not mention before. In some of these events, you can choose to meet the buyer or the person in procurement for RBC, and that meeting is set up for you during that event. That matchmaker means that you're not with other people at the table doing your pitch. You make your pitch directly to that person, and you have anywhere from 15 minutes. I've known them to be 30 minutes at times. So this is a great way to get your information in front of the buyer that you want to work with. So the typical timeline can be about 90 days from application to certification, just because of the amount of organizations now that are asking for certified business owners. I know some people who are already doing business with RBC or with another corporation where they are now asked for the renewal of their contract. Can we put you down as a certified supplier? Because it helps them in, George mentioned it about being able to have preferred suppliers that they go to so that they don't have to go through 50 different suppliers. If they find 2 or 3 women suppliers or whatever the diversity is, then they know that they have gone through an assessment process like this and their business has been identified as a diverse business.
Patricia, just going to chime in with a question.
Yes.
If a partner owner is a corporation holding 50% ownership in another corporation that is 50% women owned, would that constitute more than 50% women owned?
I would have to take a look at that. The way that's worded, there's a couple of things that come up for me.
Okay.
We also go upstream with organizations that are owned by other organizations. What I see quite often is there's a holding company. So if the holding company was owned by 50% of women and the applicant was owned by 50%, they do not have that 1% that you need. Okay. So sometimes it's very easy in an organization just to make some changes with the advice of their lawyer of how can we make this work. You always have to think about, is this something that's going to be important enough to our business that we want to make some changes to our corporation? Because when you do that, there's legal fees, there's also sometimes hurt feelings, so you want to make sure that you're doing it for the right reason. And does that answer your question, Catherine? That was yours? Okay. Some of these are...
Yeah, sorry about that. I know it was a complicated question, but you basically answered it. It still won't qualify. If it's a holding company that has joint ownership of 50% male-owned versus female.
Yeah, I was just going to ask, is the other male? Yes, then yes. You would have to find some way, if it was important to you to be certified, to have that 1% transferred. Now, I can tell you that We Connect International has a database that you don't have to be certified. You can be on their list. However, when a corporation comes to you and says, we'd really love for you to be certified, would you go through that process? That might be when you want to do it. Now, the other thing about that is you can go to any of the events of any of those councils, whether you're certified or not, but you pay a higher fee and you don't get the matchmakers. So this is some of the things that you need to consider. And thank you for the time. Yeah. Okay, so I'm not too sure if you got this as a PDF. If you don't, Carly will send it out afterwards. Just to let you know, you will have to adjust your printer to print this. It's a go, no-go decision-making matrix. You may have seen this for other business decisions. This is great for any business decision you have to make. Is like, look at the best case. If I do this, what are the benefits? And what's the best that can happen? So going over to the right-hand side, if I do this, what's the consequences? Okay, what's the worst that can happen? And then you go down to the bottom matrix. If I don't do this, what are the benefits? Well, one of the benefits is you save some work, and you save some administration, and you save the fee. Okay, and if you don't, what are the consequences? And going to the right-hand side, can my business live with whatever the consequences are of whatever I do? Can my business recover from the worst case, if there is a worst case? And if you decide to go for a certification and you don't have all the documents and you get turned down the first time, well, then you've got the experience to try again next year. And most of the councils do have this year that you have to wait. So my advice would be make sure that you are prepared. So when you do get certification, I always say it's like a ticket to the dance. It's not something you just put on your website or on your business cards. You have to show up for these events. You have to find somebody to dance with, as I say. So you have to find a buyer in procurement, someone who's going to support you through the process. And most of them are very good at that. And to enjoy the process too, because it's very involved even after you're certified. You get onto the directories, but there's a lot of work to get onto those directories. So I always recommend that you develop a template, and this template can be used for grants, anything else that you have for your business, because it's all the same kind of information, and delegate it to someone who's really good at copy and paste and learning as they go. So it could be a new employee that you want to develop into another role. I'd say attend all the events, engage and network, create collateral. George talked about, your capability statement or your pitch. So if we have time, I'll just show you a bit about a capability statement that they're looking for. It's the same as a value proposition. George touched on a lot of the things. And also to maintain and follow a plan. Because you do need a plan. It's very involved. I always say, look at it as being part of your top 3 weekly activities in developing a plan. What are your goals? Stay top of mind with the supplier diversity community, with the rest of the community, and ask for the council's team. Now, this is my own advice. You pay a fee to them, you expect to get a return on that investment. So if you need help from them, go to them and say, I need to have this introduction with this organization at this level. And they should be able to help you with that. And then my last piece of advice is to mentor one another, develop relationships within supplier diversity. All the councils, go to all their events. You can go online and see when their events are, and start to develop those relationships. Okay, are there any questions?
Don't see any in the chat.
No. Okay, I'm going to quickly flip to the next slide. This is just about the capability statement. You hear about your value proposition. George mentioned this. What's your business about? It's usually a one-pager. What can you do for your client? What have you done for your clients? What differentiates you? And what achievements, core competencies, and accreditations you may have or have had that impact your business and your client's business. So that ties in with George and Anne's presentations today. So I'm going to stop the share. If there's any hands going up. No?
Well, as Patricia mentioned, we are going to be sharing those resources and slides when we send out the follow-up email, so everyone will get those resources. So I want to thank you, Patricia, for your time and taking us through women's supplier diversity. A lot of great information in there. And also, Anne and George will send their follow-up information, and we'll put all of that information together for everyone who's on the call today.
Welcome back, everybody. I hope you found all the discussions valuable and all the information that you got today. I'm hoping you got value out of that as well and you found it engaging. So I want to thank all of our facilitators, George Stakos, Patricia Muir, and Toner Fung, for sharing their expertise. And again, a thank you to NRC IRAP for partnering with us and for their continued support with the Rhyze Up program. Thank you for attending. We will be following up, as Carly mentioned a little earlier, we'll be following up with an email that's going to contain the handouts and an evaluation link. We would also appreciate your feedback, so really please watch out for that link. It's really important to us. The link is also going to be in the chat. Carly's putting it there, so if you want to respond right away while it's still fresh in your mind, just click on it. We can't copy and paste it, so open it up and you can respond right away. And we will also include at that time a link to the recording of the educational session when it's available. And we're also going to be translating everything. So you'll have a French translated version of the video that we've recorded, and also handouts and transcription for those who would like to have that. So thank you so much for coming. And on behalf of everyone at Innovation Guelph, we have really enjoyed, Carly and I have really enjoyed working with you. And on behalf of Innovation Guelph, Carly and I, we want to thank you all for participating today in this great Rhyze Up program and for joining us. And I think we're just about on time. So we will see you again very shortly. Thank you so much. Have a great evening.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Take care.
Bye.